Welcome, everyone, to the Generation Lyme podcast. My name is Jesse Ruben. I'm on the board of Generation Lyme, and I am here with my fellow board members, Jennifer, Haley, and Brooke. Hello, everybody. How are we doing?
Great.
Good. Doing
Very
good.
well, thank you.
For those of you that are new here, Generation Lyme is a community for people with Lyme disease and anyone associated with someone who is impacted by Lyme disease. We tell patient stories, host meetups, and of course, record this awesome podcast. This podcast is about last month's monthly topic, which is control, which was one we were particularly interested in hearing about and seeing what would happen. And I think our expectations were far exceeded. I think it was a pretty successful one, but I think just to start off, I just want to get everybody's thoughts on how did you think this was going to go as a topic? Why did you think it was going to work? Why did you have any hesitations about it? Yeah, what were your initial thoughts about control as a monthly topic for these meetups?
For me, control is kind of a sore subject because I can be very controlling in little things in life. Towards OCD-esque tendencies. And it's always been like a sore subject throughout my journey with being ill. I've annoyed a couple people with it. So for me, I think we all know I like topics that get people uncomfortable. And this one makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I thought it was a cool topic because it like dredged some stuff up and I had to think about stuff a little deeper than I have in a while. But yeah, I was in the crowd this month of the not a huge fan.
Of the monthly topic in general.
Yeah, I think now I have a healthier relationship with it and I use control more to my advantage. But we'll probably get into this more in detail later, but when I was really sick, I just was desperate to control anything that I could, and might have affected a few people around me by going a little over the top with that.
Have we forgiven ourselves for the things that we did when we were very sick, Haley?
Most of them.
Hey, that's good. Yes, I am very interested.
It's a process.
If this wasn't the very beginning of the podcast, I would kind of like be grilling you a little bit because you're making lots of references to lots of things, which I'm sure people want to hear about. Jennifer and Brooke, how do you guys feel about the control monthly topic? No, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
All right, I'll give it an attempt. Well, in the past 2 or so years, we've been through a lot of topics, and control is probably on the tougher end of topics. There's some topics that might be easier for people to talk about, like community or gratitude, but control is I think a more challenging one because, at least for me, it elicits questions like, how much control do I have over my health? What I can't control with respect to my Lyme disease experience? What type of control do I have in different areas of my life? And those are, those can be challenging questions. And I think that's what this topic sort of elicits for me. So I came into this month thinking, yeah, like this is going to be like a tougher discussion, word for meetups. And I was, both excited and I think challenged to talk about the topic with people in the Gen Lyme community.
Yes, I love that. I can relate to all of that. Jennifer.
Yeah, I can relate to all of that. Same. I kept being like, well, you guys answer about how the meetups went because I wasn't there. But I actually love this topic for all of us because I think it's hard, but it's super important and it's super pervasive. Like, to what Haley and Brooke, what both of you said, it's like everybody deals with control or control issues, whether they're like your own or other people's or a combination of the two, like generally just being a human. But then when you have some kind of issue where you're maybe not really just gliding along with the rest of the world so easily anymore, control issues kind of like shoot to the top of the list in terms of like impacting your daily experiences. And so for us in our community, it's like there are things we might want to control about ourselves. We find that other people want to control us in ways that might not make us comfortable. Our bodies, our reactions to the world, like we struggle to try to literally control how reactive we are or not. And the whole process can be an issue. It's something to figure out the best way to deal with. And our community as a whole, like chronic illness, disability, et cetera, and more, even larger than that, in a very broad sense, we deal with issues of control when they come to like bodily autonomy. Just generally, it's like systemic stuff in terms of healthcare and in terms of interpersonal, like how much people have a say over us and then how much we actually have a say over ourselves. And it's like a huge conversation. And there's just so much to unpack here. And yeah, on like a daily level and like a minute to minute, but also just really big and broad. And yeah, it can be a difficult topic and something to like a challenging one to tackle. But if we can do any of it and even just engage in a conversation about it, I personally find it becomes less scary and more manageable. And in that, like that much more healing, you know, whether it impacts your physical healing or your mental and emotional healing, and just how you feel going through life, it can really be helpful. So yeah, I think it's good.
I love so much of what you said. I think I don't know about Brooke and Haley, because you guys are also on the meetups, but I find that whatever the monthly topic is, for whatever reason, like especially the last couple, like that theme like comes up in my life a lot outside of the meetups. Like I start thinking, I've been thinking a lot about control since it was the topic, and Lyme stuff, not Lyme stuff, work, family, just it's just something that I've been confronted with a lot. And I for the most part I've been really impressed and amazed by, in the face of no control or very little control or much less control than what they would like, a lot of our community members are so open and brave and vulnerable and kind and generous to each other. And I was really moved by a lot of what I heard in this past month, and just hearing people's stories and how they relate to their own bodies and their own control over themselves and their illness. And I mean, I think this one we should definitely bring back every year, because I just really think the timing of it and everything, I thought it worked really well. So, and I didn't, some more than others. Sometimes I think like, oh, this one's going to be great. And it's like, meh. But with this one, it was the opposite. I wasn't sure how it was going to, because we had it on a list for a long time. And then, and I just thought it went really well. So, I guess for you guys, I think something that would be helpful is to start with our own personal experiences of control, and maybe like some of the things that individually we were dealing with that were maybe are the most challenging as far as control or not having control when we're at our worst. I think because a lot of time people who are listening to this are all over their journey. Some are new, some have been here for a long time, some are feeling better, some are really, really sick. But I think if we just start with like when you are at your worst health wise, what were some of the things that it was most frustrating for you not to be able to control? And Haley, you sort of touched on this, but like, what were some things that you just like really held on to that you could control to sort of like balance everything out?
Am I going first again?
You don't have to. This is supposed to be an open discussion, but we can go in order if you want.
I'll sacrifice myself as tribute. Yeah, so I would like to start off by saying That just felt like a speech. I'd like to thank.
You can give a speech. If you've prepared a speech, please, by all means.
I have definitely not prepared. So no, I just I
Chapter
would like
1.
to.
I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. Sorry, I was telling Haley's life story.
I want to start off by saying when I was at my worst, I had zero control over anything, and it was one of the main sources of my panic attacks. Daily, multiple panic attacks.
Actually, 0? Nothing?
I'm getting there.
Okay, sorry.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
Yes, at my worst, I did have zero control because I had no like bodily function. I couldn't see, I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk, I couldn't hear, I couldn't like speak, I couldn't do anything. So at that point, yes, I had zero control. And I was just dependent on the world around me and thankfully my supportive parents. But so when I was not quite at my worst, but still in that area, the one thing I could control was my medicine. And to this day, I don't know how I did it because I had like no neurological functioning at the time. But somehow I was able to make a chart of all my medications and my supplements. And that was the one thing that I did on a day-to-day basis. And if my mom was my main caretaker, so she would like prepare my food, everything. Yes, she's an angel. Anyone who knows her agrees. But if she even went a foot away from my medicine cabinet, and I'm talking cabinet, Tupperware bin, whatever you want, whatever you want to say. This wasn't like a little drawer of medicine. People in our community, you know what I'm talking about. If she touched anything, if she moved my paper that had the check marks on the counter like slightly crooked, I would go into a full Lyme rage episode. And people with neuro Lyme who have Lyme rage know how insane those episodes are. If you don't, or if you're listening to learn about Lyme or be a supporter, they're one of the scariest things I've ever experienced. They're like, I yelled louder than I thought humanly possible. I would swear at my mom, call her names, and like want to hurt her, but healthy me would never want to hurt my mother.
Just for people who are listening to this that maybe haven't heard the phrase Lyme rage, can you just describe it briefly? Because it's not just, oh, I got upset.
Right. Jennifer, you might be able to help me with this because our
Or
brains
just
kind of bounce
your
off each other.
experience.
But yeah, my experience, I had really bad neuro Lyme. My experience with Lyme rage is that a switch would go off somewhere in my body. It did not feel like myself. And I had, going back to control, I had zero control over what was coming out of me. Verbally, physically, everything. I had zero control over it, but it was like pure anger. And I've been angry before in my life, don't get me wrong, but it's a completely different feeling than like being mad at a friend or being mad at a parent and yelling because you're upset. For me, it was completely different. It felt completely out of my control. I could not stop it. I couldn't start it. It just, something would trigger something in my brain and the Lyme rage would start. And my mom would actually tell me too, like after it was over, because after it was over, I would start crying, I would be apologizing. And she finally started saying to me, it's okay. I know it's not you, because when it happens, your eyes just go blank. And then she was like, she kept saying like, so I just sit there with you, deal with it, know what's going to happen, and then you come back into your eyes and I know it's over. So I don't know how to explain it other than it's not you. It is like possibly quite literally a little bug in your brain turning a light switch on and off.
That must have been so scary for your mother too.
I cannot even imagine. And speaking about control, I'm going like totally on a tangent here, but in the parents meetup last month, that was part of the theme, was that like these parents felt helpless watching their kids go through this kind of stuff, and they just wanted their kid to go to college and meet someone, be happily ever happily ever after. Speak. And all of a sudden they couldn't control any of it anymore. So yes, when I was at my almost worst, to bring it back, my main source of control was my medical regimen. And the days when I couldn't handle it were not pretty. I'll just say that.
Jennifer, did you have something you wanted to say about Lyme rage or just control in general?
Well, I wanted to help out with Haley's request, see if I could add in anything. I think, Haley, you did a great job of explaining it, but for people who are just like new to the topic, it's an involuntary episode that is caused by an infection and inflammatory markers and like literal neuroendocrine disruptors that is pretty well documented in infections. So it's not just Lyme rage is called Lyme rage because it's like an episode that happens associated with Lyme disease, but infectious diseases can cause and have been documented to cause violent and aggressive episodes across the board. And this is well documented in scientific research, so it can be found. But with disruptions and things like neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and stuff like that, and a variety of co-infections can also cause these kinds of things. And it's literally like, you may have heard, and this may be the first time for you if you're new to this topic, but Lyme disease can cause a significant amount of inflammation in the brain. So sometimes people have something called Lyme encephalitis, meaning your brain is inflamed due to the presence of Lyme disease. And so all of these things can cause episodes that are abnormal to the person dealing with them, but really legitimately caused by the presence of an infection. So, I mean, I can understand how a term Lyme rage might sound strange or like quaint or maybe not even real, but it's very real. It's very legitimate. It's really commonly experienced by people in our community, and it's due to the presence of a very real and persistent, pervasive, and bad infection. And what Haley described is a great example of something that a lot of people suffer from. And you just like those people when we have them, they're not there. It's not great. But yeah, and that's the loss of control would definitely be part of it.
Brooke, what was like when you, I mean, I know what I want you to talk about, but like, what were some of your biggest challenges when it comes to control in your journey?
Yeah, I think, for me, I've had Lyme disease and babesiosis for 12 years. And the first 3 years for me were the toughest because those were the years when I wasn't diagnosed with Lyme disease and babesiosis. And I probably had the most lacking of control. I describe those 3 years as sort of like dealing with a mystery illness, as many people do in our community. And I kept just like buying time so I could do more research or see more doctors or talk to more people until I finally figured out what my diagnosis was. And it took 3 years. In those years, I tried to implement types of control, and the goal for me was always to limit my symptom set as much as possible, to minimally disrupt the other things I wanted to do in life, like work or travel or see my friends or go to school. And so, unlike Haley, in my early years, medication didn't play a major role, although I did experiment with some herbal supplements and some medications that didn't directly kill Lyme disease inside my body. But I tried to control my symptom set through things that will sound so familiar to people in our community. Things like exercise, things like getting enough sleep, things like my diet was hyper controlled in ways that I know I don't have to explain, because we've all implemented types of diets to
I just
optimize our
started
health.
I just started laughing because I just remember this time when I just decided, like, I'm not going to eat anything, like, no chemicals. I'm going to only eat natural, organic, everything. And I was in the Whole Foods in Union Square with my now wife. And I was in the aisle for tuna fish for like 20 minutes because I was picking up each can and reading all the ingredients. And she just like started filming me for more the better part of an hour. Like, it took so long to try and find things that I was thought weren't going to make me sick. So as soon as you said that, I just was like obsessively reading food labels and
Gotta
control,
stick with
man.
that plain boiled organic chicken.
There's only so
Exactly.
long.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised diet didn't come up more, because I know people.
Going to come up later in this podcast.
Good. Because that for me was a big one. But I know people. I have a friend who ate nothing but grilled chicken, green apples, and rice, plain rice for a decade. Like, some people could not exist on that. Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting. When you said that,
I'm glad you did. I mean, and since you said it, my diet was described as plain chicken, green apples, almonds, plain vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower, and salt was okay, almond oil was okay, but there just like wasn't a lot that I could consume. And the reason that I tolerated that type of diet for probably 2 years or so is because I was trying to control really complicated symptoms. And for me, the worst symptoms were brain fog, chemical sensitivities, food sensitivities, and fatigue. And
for
where
those who haven't heard your podcast episode, can you just briefly detail one of the things you used to do for your chemical sensitivities that may or may not involve your laundry?
I was very sensitive to chemicals that would be found in a lot of different laundry detergents. So I think you're referring to the summer when I lived in New York City, and there was a
Yep.
washer in the apartment that I was living in with a roommate, but he washed his clothes in sort of a normal way with the normal laundry detergent, and I was intolerant of having my clothes sort of like go in big circles, like in the same washer, and get sort of tainted by, that or his laundry detergent. So I used to take a bus to my other apartment in Philadelphia every Friday and do my laundry in that apartment. And the reason, for anyone who's wondering, that I had two apartments, it's because I was in graduate school in Philly where I was actually renting an apartment, and I had a summer job in New York where I temporarily needed an apartment for 2 months. But yeah, every Friday, in order to control my chemical sensitivities, Jesse, it made complete sense for me to move from one city to the next so I could safely wash clothes and then have clean, safe clothes to wear to work for the upcoming week.
I just think that's such a great example of like the lengths people will go to when dealing with this stuff. When you figure out a way to take the guesswork out of it, or having to worry, like, you could have washed your clothes in other places, but then you would have had to worry every single time. So it's
Right.
like, to eliminate that, like to schlep back and forth I just think is incredible. Also, the having two different apartments at the same time is not the flex. The flex is that you had a New York City apartment with a washer and dryer in it. That's the flex.
I just felt I needed to explain myself. Yes.
But I just think that's such a great example because I just, the first time I heard that, you said it so casually, like, of course this was a thing I did all summer. Where like, but a quote unquote like normal non-Lyme person would never. It would never occur to them. It wouldn't cross them, you know. So I want people to realize the lengths that chronically ill people have to go to just to maintain a level of normalcy, you know. So I still can't believe you did that. And also, if you haven't yet, you should go back and listen to the podcast where Brooke really gets into his story in depth, because there's a lot of things like that, and it is really incredible. Jennifer, I know that you have a lot to say on this topic, and I can see the wheels turning over there. So I'd love to know, when you were at your worst, some of the challenges that you faced when it came to control. Obviously, we mentioned the diet stuff, but I'm sure there were others.
Yeah, the funny thing is the diet stuff is not when I was at my worst. It's like I relate to so much of what everyone has said and is probably going to say. And I do have a lot to say on this topic. And I think the wheels are turning, because it's like, can I get it all in? You know, it's really tough.
We'll do a part 2 if we have to.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this topic for me, it's like a good jumping off point to talk about my experience with Lyme disease and chronic illness, because it's like it provides a framework for how I've dealt with it and how other people have dealt with it and my experience with stuff. So it's kind of like working for me. But like I think the fact that I've had it for a long time in an evolving way, and yes, it was like, I mean, like what Brooke said, like a mystery illness that I tried to control, and I tried, in many ways to limit my symptoms, limit my its kind of appearance in my life. You know, it's kind of like minimize its presence as much as possible. Definitely minimize its appearance as far as like other people's experience of it, so that maybe they couldn't notice it. And so I did a lot for a long time. You know, I felt like I wasn't well. Granted, for those who, I also have EDS, which is a genetic thing. Didn't know about that for a long time. So there would probably have been some symptoms or something unusual going on with me for all of life.
Can you briefly describe what EDS is in case somebody listening has it?
Yes, I can.
And doesn't know?
EDS is short for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder. There are many types. I at least know that I have a hypermobile type, which is just laxity of joints and instability of connective tissues. But it's more than just joints. It's like connective tissue run throughout your entire body. So you're sort of unstable in areas where like a non-EDS body would be stable, and that can cause a variety of issues. And some of them coincide with Lyme and co-infection symptoms, and some of them compound those symptoms. So for like Lyme disease, the Lyme bacteria attacks your connective tissues like right away. So that's why I personally believe that there's like an overrepresentation, meaning like a lot of people in the chronic Lyme or like long-term Lyme, persistent Lyme community who have EDS, because like there really would be prone to having a hard time getting rid of it, because Lyme would be like loving those connective tissues that are already kind of having a hard time. So anyway, Yes, I was controlling a lot. I was trying to control a lot of things, and a lot of them had to do with like, just like bare bones, what I tell people, how I present myself to the world, what I choose to deal with privately versus publicly. And then I made adjustments in my environment, probably small lifestyle things. And then the diet came into a big and then bigger and then kind of all consuming part of my life, because as I started to get diagnosed with like smaller localized problems. You know, this is usually what happens with a Lyme patient. It's like you go to the doctor going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Suddenly someone will be like, well, you have allergies. And the trigger of your allergies is the following things. So like you're allergic to, milk, so don't have milk, or you're allergic to soy, don't have soy, you know? And so, and I had that experience, but I had that experience with many things. So it was like allergies, make adjustments in a lot of ways, lifestyle, food, etc. Allergies, migraines, joint problems, acid reflux, interstitial cystitis, and each one came with its own set of like, do not eat the following things list. And they all were separate from each other. They were all like disparate. And so I kept having to adjust and kept going like, this is it. I'm going to be good now that I've done this. And each time it proved to be not quite right.
So at the end, what did you end up eating?
There was no end. This is, I want to explain that. There was never an end. There was never like, I'll get there. That's why it's like a long topic, because
Sure.
there was no like, at my worst, I was only sure. Like there's always like the phase of the plain chicken and plain either vegetable or rice. And then suddenly it's like, you can't have carbs, or, you know, or you can't have broccoli. It's bad for your stomach, and so on. Or like, I'm only going to eat vegetables. No,
First of all, I love
gonna
this
eat
voice that
protein.
you're doing.
We talked about funny voice.
I love this.
Really tired.
This
so
old grandma voice that you're doing. I am
you can't have
loving.
carbs. What do you? It's like okay. So I'll just never sleep before podcasts.
What are we gonna do without the bagels?
What are we gonna do without bagels? Oh yeah, there's
These voices are hilarious.
right. And that's a very real experience too. So yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, we're having fun. It's
Yeah.
the Control Podcast.
And it was
We're having
fun.
fun.
Let me tell you.
Here's the perfect example of you can't control anything.
Relax. Nothing is under control. Oh my God. First, I think I can eat mangoes, and now I find I can't eat the dried mangoes. Let's talk about a really raging experience.
No, that's just
Oh
cruel.
no.
Anyway.
Oh no.
Oh no, mango. No.
This
I'll
is not
never
an
leave
ad.
the
We are very
bananas.
pro dried mango here at Generation Lyme.
I'm still pro. Can't control me. So the diet thing, and I still want to circle back to that, was like a really big deal. But then I became increasingly sensitive to my environment, right? And had to continually make adjustments, and not for nothing, started to get really anxious about all kinds of things with relation to like, yes, it could have been it could have been the laundry. It could have been whether or not there would be like an air quality problem, allergens, mold, pests, whatever, you know. And if the food at another place was going to be okay, because I've really struggled with mast cell issues and anaphylaxis, and it's like, ugh. And so there's a lot of control issues there, and then other people trying to. And I also really struggled with feeling like other people wanted to control how I was dealing with my problem, and I don't even really want to say problem, just like my set of needs, right? Like we all have set of needs. Yes. And I tried a variety of different ways to adjust to that. And sometimes it was like, then I try to control them back, or I'd say, I don't care, you know, or I'd find something in the middle, which ultimately was better. But at my worst, each of these problems was stacking over time. I didn't actually get rid of any of them until I started to get good treatment, which for me was like heavy antibiotics and the right set. And it was just a long time coming. And by the time I got to that kind of good cocktail for me, I was in a bad neurological way and very, very sensitive to my environment. And I was really losing control of like my bodily functions and my emotional state, and had brain problems that landed me in the hospital, and it was very scary. And so, you know, what was once my primary concern about like managing my diet to not be in pain was like hilariously unimportant because I wanted to be able to speak, and walk and swallow. Like, it's just making sure that the mechanism of my breathing was going to be like functioning. And I think that started me on a path of being like, well, I've tried so hard to control so many things. It's been such a majestic, catastrophic failure that I'm starting this new perspective where trying to control everything isn't really getting me anywhere, and trying to control myself, my surroundings. So so I started to look for new ways of handling the environment around me and adjusting to them mentally. Like, yes, I can control my feelings about things to some degree, or I can just ride the wave and know that that's as much as I can control it, and there's like freedom in that. And that kind of helped me with things, because feeling totally out of control and then trying to fix it and still not managing, it's not a great place to stay.
So much to think about in all of that. And I do want to touch on the controlling other people thing in a second, but what is it? Is there anything? And I guess I would ask all of you, because I think one of the things that came up a lot in the meetup was like when my diet was like no gluten, no sugar, no dairy, no alcohol, no caffeine. All of that was literally like not a problem, except the sugar thing. I like literally could not exist without eating sugar. I didn't care if it was killing me. I like had to do it because I'm an emotional eater and whatever. So I guess I just want to say, if you're listening to this and there are things that you think you should be doing, but you're not doing all of them all the time, that's okay. I think one of the things that came up a lot, I was saying, is like people feeling really guilty or like a failure because they want to control everything and they can't. And then they think, oh, I must be weak, or I'm pathetic, or I'm not a good enough patient. I'm not doing this right. I'm not making enough sacrifices. I don't know. Are there things that you could say to people that might be listening to this, who are like trying to figure out what their best treatment plan is, what their best diet is? They're trying to figure out what medications they want to take and how to get themselves to feel the best. And it feels like their lives are spinning all around them and there's nothing they can do. I don't know. I just think that to me, that came up kind of a lot. And I think this is something, I think control is so interesting because it's something that we don't talk about a lot, and it impacts everybody, I mean, healthy people too, but especially people who are dealing with chronic illnesses. And to make it a monthly topic, we're really shining a light on like, oh, these are how people cope, and this is how people minimize their suffering, and this is how people just survive until tomorrow. All of those things are about control. And so I just know that there are patients listening to this and in our community online that are constantly feeling like they're not doing enough, and control is a big part of that. So I just don't know I just was wondering if any of you guys wanted to speak to the new Lyme patient, or the patient who's just in it and over their head and overwhelmed and beating themselves up and all that kind of stuff.
I love the question. A lot to say about it. But like, a lot of people are going to try to tell you what to do, and they're going to there's a big pitch, especially in the broader community, like the wellness community, that there's a single right way to do things to be healthy, and a big pressure to adhere to that under penalty. Like, if you don't do that, you won't or can't be well, or you can't live your best life or something like that. And I don't ascribe to that. And you don't have to feel how I feel or believe what I believe, or live how I live, or any of that. But you still have control over parts of yourself that you may feel have come out of control. I think a lot of us often feel like it's all gone when the illness happens to us or some trauma comes along, and like things change. But I think it's important to remember that we still have like agency in areas where we might not think it, and even if things look different and we have to like figure out a new way or like a new normal. And to the first thing I said, just we may have just have like put a trigger warning on this episode a little bit because we've talked about food, but we might be the food thing is a big deal because there are a lot of people, even some doctors, but definitely practitioners and like coaches and influencers who pitch wellness and talk really hard about diets. And there's a term for that. And I'm like hesitant to use it and just say that like but I would caution people to be aware of what orthorexia is and how easy it is to fall into that trap. And what it is it's a type of disorder similar to like an eating disorder or an obsessive compulsive type of behavior where you overly obsess over healthy food or like the healthy quality of your food and lifestyle to a point of extreme limitation or to in some level that debilitates you in your broader life. And that's not to say that like if healthy food or eating is your thing, that's fine. But I think there are some of us who would be lying if we said that it hadn't kind of like gotten the better of us at one point or another in our journeys. Like it definitely has gotten the better of me at some times because I've been so nervous to mess up my body or mess up my system and my like attempts to be healthy that I've obsessed over, every ingredient or every label. And there have been times when I haven't needed to do that. And so it might seem, harder to like pave your own path, but everybody's different. So we can find buddies and friendship and community in this, but like we still have to kind of maintain some agency in figuring things out for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I mean, I know when I was first learning about Lyme disease, like I had people in my life that were like, "Oh, it's just like because it's mostly women on the internet, especially that are talk about their illness." And I definitely had people in my life like, "Oh, they're like they all just have eating disorders, and they all are just like saying that they're sick so they can justify these choices." And like breaking that stigma, it's like, okay, on top of just believing this is real and exists at all, now I have to like convince you that like these people that I know are actually sick and not that an eating disorder is not an illness, because it obviously is, but like that they actually have a infection. It's not just an eating disorder. There's something else happening here. And so I love that you brought that up, and I'm sure it is much more pervasive than we think it is. And I know that.
And there's still good reasons for checking labels, by the way.
Totally.
I'm not knocking that at all. It's just like,
yeah, but just like in moderation, like everything else kind of. And Brooke and Haley, I would love to know your thoughts on all of this. But I also, before we start wrapping up, I just would love to know about, and Haley, you mentioned this with your mom a little bit, because we've talked a lot about our own like self-control, but I'm wondering about how that came up in relationships with people in your lives when you were dealing with your illness. Not necessarily at your worst, but just like some of the challenges and some of the things that you did that helped with that stuff. Because obviously we know we can't control other people, but we have to interact with other people in order to exist in the world. Now we're all using voices again. And so I was just wondering if there was anything that stuck out to you about trying to control other people, or you couldn't and it was frustrating, or something that you figured out in order to like navigate all of that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, if you could just like, if you
Never
could just
had any
imagine it.
difficulty existing with others in my life. But if I had to imagine it, well, then that's another story. um
We're a little we're recording this kind of late. We're a little off the rails here, and I like it. I'm here for
it's
it.
late at night, it's the end of the week.
It's great.
We're all hanging in there.
Fantastic.
So first, to cover the original question, and by the way, love everything Jennifer said. Obviously, I always love everything you guys say on these, at least like 99% of the time. And I really appreciate bringing up the food stuff, because even before I knew what was going on, or even like tried controlling symptoms, I always had a weird relationship with food. I think a lot of people do nowadays, but and then once the diagnosis came and it was like, okay, no sugar, no processed food, no carbs, no this, no that, and it was like boiled chicken and steamed broccoli with nothing on it for a few years. Like, I used to tell people, like, a defrosted strawberry a week was like my treat, and like you could see people's brains just implode, and I'm like, yeah, it's true.
One. You would eat
When I was
one
really sick,
strawberry.
I would eat a frozen strawberry, so it had like none of the chemicals of a like
Yeah.
fresh strawberry. Yeah, I would have like a bowl in the fridge. We would defrost them, and
Oh
like
my God.
I don't remember how many I ate, but I know it wasn't more than like 1 or 2 a week. But yeah, once like the guidelines, quote unquote, came, then it was, at the beginning, it was kind of an opportunity for me. I definitely got lost in it to like really restrict myself in not a healthy way. And like Jesse, like you said, there's people in the community that eat a green apple and boiled chicken for 10 years because if they don't, they'll literally end up in the hospital because their body just rejects it.
Totally.
So there's such a spectrum, and I think it's so important to bring it up. Anywho, I just wanted to say I think Jennifer covered that lovely, very well, whatever the word is. We're doing fine, folks.
You're doing great.
But I wanted to say, to someone who doesn't know where to start and is feeling very out of control, just like take a freaking breath. I know in the beginning I said there was a point where I literally couldn't control anything, and now talking through this podcast, that's not really true. I could always control my breath. Not very well, but I can always breathe. And your body. You're going to get a lot of things thrown at you of what to do, what not to do. Like Jennifer was saying, this is right, this is wrong, do this, not that. You're doing this wrong. You're like, whatever. Take a freaking breath and step back for a second when you're feeling out of control and overwhelmed. And there's so many ways that you can, I shouldn't say that you can, that I've used to feel more centered and like to create a plan and say, okay, this is the baseline, now let's move on, right? So like taking a step back, going through my medicine list, saying this makes me feel like crap, I'm done. Obviously talk to your doctor before taking or adding any supplements or anything. But just like making a list. If you use Post-its, use Post-its. Not calling anyone out. Go pet your dog or cat, like anything to just bring you back to the present. And just remember, you're doing your absolute best. If you took a breath today and you're surviving the day, congratulations. Like, especially since 2020, when the panorama started, we see more and more quote unquote healthy, normal people coming to people in a chronic illness community asking for advice on like how to live like this. And in the beginning of 2020, there was a big theme that people in our community were very annoyed because like all of our friends or people around us, all of a sudden they wanted to know what we do all day, or like, how do you do this? You know? So there's been like this semi-awakening, I feel like, of this lack of control over your life. And just taking a deep breath and remembering that you're doing the best you can. And that's incredible. I think is a really important step. It took me like 28 years to figure that out. And it definitely changed my life. To go to the second question, I'll make this quick so Brooke can have a turn as well. But Jesse, you said something in the beginning that was interesting, asking me if I have forgiven myself for things I might have done when I was really sick, or whatever the sentence was. And part of my control stuff is that it's really hard for me to live with other people. Partially because of sensitivities, partially just because I get like very overwhelmed. I get sensory overload. So I like things to be where I left them because I have memory problems. Smells, like it's very hard for me to live with other people. So part of taking control was moving out from living with roommates to a studio. Thank you. It's been a dream ever since. But at the beginning of that, like, I didn't want roommates because I wanted to be independent. But there was this other side where I was ashamed that it was so hard for me to live with people that I like, quote unquote, needed to live alone, which wasn't really true. I could live with roommates. I did for a couple of years. And I did in college and stuff. It just took a lot more energy than I needed to. So again, taking a step back and just appreciating that I can live alone, I can take care of myself enough to live alone, and that it's not like this shameful thing that I can't, that I am more at peace when I don't have roommates or anything like that. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that sentence, but
I have all that same stuff, and
a lot of people do.
I was feeling bad for my wife as you were talking.
Oh.
We have
Feel bad for my future husband.
We have just a couple minutes left, and Brooke, I wanted to give you one more opportunity to just to address anyone who's listening who just might be really like in over their head and overwhelmed and feeling very out of control.
Yeah, I've been thinking about what I could say as a response to that question. And first, I love doing these podcasts because I learned so much from, Jennifer's story and perspective, and Haley's story and perspective, and yours too, Jesse. And I think one of the themes that I've derived from the past hour that I hope is helpful to people listening is that all four of us have struggled to figure out what control means in our own health experiences. And I hope that people listening who might be wondering what they can control and what they can't control with respect to their health, I hope they find comfort in knowing that we struggle with it too, and we have struggled with it too. Jesse, something you said, maybe 20 minutes ago was really important, and I had never thought about it, which is the idea of control just isn't talked about that much relative to some other aspects of Lyme disease that probably are. So for example, we talk more openly about things like doctors or symptoms or diet, for example, but we don't really, pal around with our friends or our colleagues and talk about how we're just like trying to keep it all together, which is the concept of control. And so lo and behold, we've spent almost 60 minutes talking about it tonight. And I just think, Jesse, that was such a great point that you made, because we're all thinking about it internally, probably with a lot of our time, but we don't get to discuss it and figure out the tools or the framework with which to establish control over aspects of our health experience. And so that's what I would say to people listening. All four of us have struggled with this, but we think about it a lot internally. And if you're thinking about it internally and struggling with it too, we can certainly empathize with that.
Well, I think that is a perfect note to end this episode on. This happens every time. I feel like we could have talked for another 4 hours. I likewise, Brooke, I love listening to you guys talk every time we do one of these. So if you have been listening to the end, thank you so much for being with us this whole time. On behalf of Haley, Brooke, and Jennifer, my name is Jesse, and we just so appreciate you listening to this. If you would like information about what we do and our meetups, you can go to genlyme.org, GENLYME.org. Please rate and review us 5 stars everywhere you get your podcasts. It really helps spread the word for us. And we'll be back next month for another monthly topic podcast. Thank you so much. And we will see you all very soon. Thanks, guys. You guys, everything you said was brilliant as per usual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse.